Hey, everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business. I'm looking forward to talking with Mark Fox. Mark, it's great to connect with you. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Just your bio, it just sounds really interesting. Think Community, Mark is an entrepreneur. He's a scientist. He's a former space shuttle engineer with experience as a hot air balloonist and airplane builder, creator of the Vibe, the only pocket pulse electromagnetic field device. It's designed for easy use while performing daily activities. We're going to get into what it does and what it's all about. But one of the things that it does do is it provides frequency resonance frequency therapy. So I want to start and I want to talk about frequency before we get started at anything, because I think this is a newish term to many people, frequency and what that means. And so, how would you define frequency?
Well, think of a surfer sitting in the ocean. So the amount of times the wave comes by is the frequency, how many times per second a wave comes by. And then the intensity is how tall is the wave. So the energy is the combination of those two, is how strong is the signal, how big is the wave, and how often does the wave come by. So that's it at the simplest thing. And everything is frequency. We're frequency, this table, this computer, it doesn't exist without frequencies vibrating, making the thing actually exist, because everyone knows 99% of everything is nothing, right? There's nothing there. It's just frequency and vibration and stuff. So at the highest level, what some of this stuff is, if you wanted to go there, is this: if you think of it as an energy transfer. So nothing in the world happens without an energy transfer. Okay? That fire behind you, if it was real, right? You don't cook food, you don't breathe oxygen, you don't fall down, break your leg, your car doesn't run, you don't fly an airplane. Everything's energy transfer. So if you think about it that way, these frequencies are resonating with your body for different conditions and different ailments, those type of things. And it can be delivered, that energy can be delivered with magnetic fields, electrical current, vibration, sound, and light. So all of them are frequencies, and they can all be delivered that way. And a lot of different instruments do that. This one is a pulse electromagnetic field. It's one of the 5 ones I just mentioned. That makes it really convenient because you don't have wires on you. You can take it anywhere with you, like for the lights and stuff. You have to have
let's pause before we talk about taking it with you, because I want to make sure people understand. So here I am as a human being. And I just want you to kind of break this down. And I am emitting a frequency. And so is that frequency low? Is it high? And how do because it's, to many, it's invisible. To many, this is a new word. To many, it's hard to wrap their arms around it, right? So what do you mean I move at a frequency? So is it a frequency? So a lot of times when I'm doing keynotes, one of the things I'll talk about is visualize where you're at. Now raise your vibration or raise your frequency. And I kind of walk people through that, and they begin to kind of understand it. But I still think for the masses, it's harder to understand. I see when I speak to people about it, because people ask me, what do you mean by frequency? So can you talk a little bit about kind of how it exists, like within us? Do we have control over it? And then, how do we raise our frequency? And then how does your machine assist in getting us maybe healthier frequency?
So use your example of amping up a little bit or getting at a higher level is, so everyone's probably familiar. You have different brain waves, right? You have alpha, theta, delta, beta, gamma, right? So, and they're all different levels.
Yeah.
So if your normal beta condition or something, if you're going to go into high mode presenting a keynote, you'd be best to probably be at a gamma level, which is about as high as you're going to get. And it's just called entrainment. So the frequencies, so your brain waves are going to say at 30 hertz. So if they're at 20 and you want to get them to 35 to amp up your presentation a little bit, you run a frequency at 35 and it's harmonizing, right? It's resonating with your body to increase that amplitude and to tune, that's a better word, to tune your brain to those correct frequencies.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a minute. So a meditation that I do is called hemi-syncing. It's from the Monroe Institute. Are you familiar with the Monroe Institute?
I'm not, no.
So you check it out. Monroe Institute is all about you listen with headphones, and they're frequencies. They're frequencies that give certain frequencies to the left ear for the left brain, the right ear for the right brain, to access a middle part of the brain, right? But it's all frequency. It's actually, the government uses it a little bit as well.
Right.
For remote viewing and things of that nature. It's pretty interesting for anybody who's interested to look into it. And so how does kind of our everyday frequency that people are walking through the day, and then where can you give a visual of how your machine, what it actually does for them? Does it keep them healthier? Does it balance their nervous system? How does that work?
So, and I'm a scientist, so I'm skeptical myself. So I'm going to explain it this way. First of all, nobody knows. Nobody knows. Okay. Nobody knows how aspirin works, and nobody knows how any drug in the world works. And if any doctor tells you they do, they're full of shit. Okay. They just don't. They have theories on how it works, but they don't know how it works. They haven't proven it. So going back a little bit, just so you know, is your body, as you know, is chemical, mechanical, and electrical. Now, 1934 actually came out in 1910, but it didn't get enforced till 1934. Yes, I'm going way back. Here's how the United States got screwed up. Dale Carnegie and J.P. Morgan, right? Those guys. J.P. Morgan figured out I can make drugs out of oil, and I own all the oil. So all this electrical stimulation research that was going on in the United States, Carnegie and J.P. Morgan said, you're going to lose your medical license, because they owned the equivalent of the AMA at the time. They had all the university funding for any kind of research. So I said, if it's not surgery and it's not drugs, we're not funding you anymore. So in the United States, in the US only, you said a lot of people haven't heard of it. We're behind everyone else.
Yeah.
For that reason.
Well, I don't, and talk maybe a little bit about Nikola Tesla. You know, Nikola Tesla was actually kind of one of the master brains behind frequency
Right.
in that same era that you're talking about. And, so kind of, can you layer that in a little bit?
Yeah, well, he's like one of the earliest ones, but where I was going to go with that, and here's the sadness, all the research got scrapped. So when you're asking me, where's it come from? How does it work? So 35 years ago, for most of the protocols I'm using, a woman bought a chiropractic's office. She was a chiropractor. And in the back of the room, under a tarp, is a machine with some wires on it and some knobs. And it says inflammation, 40 hertz, vitality, 127 hertz. Well, what the hell does that mean? Where did it come from? Nobody knows, because all that research got scrapped. You don't even know whose machine was. She doesn't know who the card was. So she started practicing just playing with the knobs. Okay, so what about inflammation in your medulla? So let's try that. So it ended up being like 8,000 practitioners over 35 years coming up with these protocols. So they're not frequency specifically. This is a big misconception on this device. A lot of PMF devices are. This one is using two frequencies at the same time. Frequency A is where is it? B is what's wrong with it, sort of. Okay. So picture that as a chord on a guitar, right? 2-string chord. It's going to change every like 1 to 4 minutes, and it's going to create a brand new song or a whole different song. So PTSD or anxiety or depression or any protocol that's on there is completely different from the other one. And where did it come from? Trial and error of practitioners. So when you get into the reason I preface it with that, because you go, how does it work? What's the mechanism of action? That's what doctors do to me. I'm like, so I'd slap them back down with, you don't know how aspirin or any drug works, so shut up for a minute. But here's what we do know. We know that cells in your body have an electrical charge just like a car battery, and when it gets low, you get sick. Okay. ATP, adenosine, I pronounced it wrong on another podcast, and I just got murdered by all the people out there. Anyway, adenosine triphosphate, ATP. It's a main fuel in the food chain for your cells. It's been proven that this increases ATP up to 500%. So at the simplest level, it's recharging your cells' batteries. It's giving your body a lot more food, good food for your cells to eat so the body can do what it does best, heal itself. That's really all anyone knows. That now there's a bunch of theories and tangents you can go down, but yeah, the reason I wanted to elaborate that a little bit is because there is no correct answer. It's like I do crop formation research. I'm the half a guy in the United States that does, and everyone's like, "What's the answer? What's the answer?" Well, there isn't one. Nobody knows what the answer is. So this is what the data is. Here's the experience. So yeah, it's.
So let me ask you a question. So how much is it the mind versus kind of the megahertz, the frequencies that you're talking about? You know, how much does someone need to actually believe in it in order for maybe something to heal them? Under the assumption that it does heal, how much of it is the mind allowing it in?
So I'll ask you that same question for morphine. How much is placebo and how much is real? Any drug in the world, right? It falls in that same category as trying to separate that out is near impossible. So is there a placebo effect? There has to be. Is it the main driver? I don't think so. But in many conditions like PTSD, anxiety, depression, I don't care if it's 100% placebo. If you're going out and you're living your life now, you don't have a gun in your mouth anymore, you're not suicidal. I'm serious about all that because we have many cases like that, right? There's many examples like that. So you don't. I know I'm not giving direct answers because I'm telling you what we do, what we do and don't know, and I don't want to speculate too far because I mean some of the audience.
Give us an example. How about this? Give us an example of how this has helped certain people. I think people learn through story. How has your machine helped people?
Number one is PTSD. We have a 98% success rate. How do you measure that? We're using a before and after questionnaire that's from the government. It's the Veterans Administration test. It's PLC-5 is what it's called. And you're measuring scores before and after. So it's self-reported. Now, is that super scientific? No. We keep trying to get more and more biomarkers. But the gold standard still when you walk in a doctor's office, the gold standard still today in 2024 is a chart on the wall, 0 to 10, 0 smiling, 10 the guy's crying. Which are you? Well, I'm an 8. And then they leave after whatever the intervention is. I'm a 3. So you self-report that. But there are more and more and more, as you know, biomarkers and Oura rings and Fitbits and non-invasive stuff like that. There's invasive stuff you can do with measuring cytokines in the blood, things like that. So pain, which is one of the number one things in the world, you can measure directly pain reduction in your blood by measuring the drop in cytokines. But you got to go do a blood sample and do all that. So the easiest, simplest thing to do, and I don't have anything to do with these guys except that they're affordable. A Fitbit 3, Inspire 3, this is $79-$80. Yeah. It has heart rate variability and sleep in it. More and more and more and more studies are pointing to heart rate variability. If that increases, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. Because that is the main function of your body. That's vagus nerve and toning and all that. And the other one is sleep. Are you getting more sleep and more quality sleep? If so, you're probably not as depressed and you're probably not as much pain. You're probably not as much whatever, right? So they're all subjective mostly, and then you try and get more objective measurements. We're doing some lab tests right now for a couple different things here over in Orlando. And again, like I said, it's super hard to measure exactly, but so is everything else, right?
Let me ask you a question. I thank you for that. So you're a scientist. You're a former space shuttle chief engineer, and what you're talking, your device, and what we're talking about today. There's art and there's science in it, and so a lot of times scientists are thinking more about the science and not the art. But it sounds like you kind of can live in both worlds, looking at the science and the art, the known, the unknowns, and so just when as a scientist did you begin looking, or have you always kind of looked at both sides of things?
Not always. I was more of an engineer. My undergraduate's chemical engineering. I was more of a scientist. About 30 years ago, I forced myself to. So I teach creative thinking classes. I teach marketing. I've written a few books on it. I've forced myself to go learn that piece of it. So I'm not just the nerdy science engineer, right? So, and there's all kinds of famous quotes like that. Science I think it was think of his name in a second. Feynman, I think, said is like, from a scientific point of view, if the answer isn't beautiful, you get the wrong one.
Yeah.
You got to keep looking, right? So there's the combination of science and art, right? Should be mixed everywhere. And on a Myers-Briggs test, yes, I'm INTJ, but I kind of fit. I'm not polarized in any direction very far.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you kind of look back at your career, were there people or influences, mentors that had an impact on you at an early age that began to kind of, lay the foundation and some seeds of where you are today, in the way that you think and the way that you, kind of look at things from your perspective?
Yes, I mean, there's a few people I looked up to in aerospace that were more senior guys, just the way they thought and they presented themselves and their thought process. But honestly, and it's going to sound weird from a rock scientist, the guy that's been the biggest mentor influence in my life is the highest paid ad writer in the country. His name is Roy Williams. So we have a thing called the Wizard Academy. Sounds really weird. It's a nonprofit in Austin, Texas, where you teach super cool stuff in 1 to 3 days. I teach a couple classes there. I've learned more from the students there.
Yeah.
That thinking completely different than me, right? There's no rocket scientists. I mean, it's funny because there I'm kind of the nerdy guy. Outside of there, I'm the creative, weird guy.
Yeah.
In the rest of the environment, right? So that group, and specifically Roy Williams, I asked him, how did you get into this business being an ad writer? He goes, Mark, I'd prefer to read poetry and write poetry all day long, but nobody's going to pay me to do that. And poetry is the one language that influences people and their thoughts. So that's what I became an ad writer, and he's extremely successful. So learning that kind of stuff from him and some of the other instructors there of stuff I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
So that's the answer to my question.
Yeah.
Roy and then the rest of the Wizard Academy.
That's cool. That's cool. You talked about you teach creative thinking. There's with AI on the rise, and there's so many things that you can do with it. I think creative thinking, coming up with ideas and being creative is really important. What's one thing that you teach that's a big takeaway when it comes to how to think creatively?
There's only 40 answers.
Okay.
No, that's the real answer. So TRIZ, called TRIZ. It's a Russian acronym that stands for the Theory of Inventive Problem Solving, TRIZ. Most people that teach it are Russian PhDs, and it's very boring. So Roy and I put a class together 25 years ago to make it fun. So it's not just engineering, it's marketing. And where it comes from is it Henrik Altschuler and then his team, they looked at creativity and how are things invented and found out they fall into 40 different answers. They just keep repeating themselves. So you use it as a lens to look at a specific problem, look at one of those lenses and say, I'll just give you the first one, segmentation. How do you break it in smaller pieces to make it better? Number 2 is taking away. How do I take stuff out of it to make it better?
Yeah.
Right. So you just look at it through those lenses, knowing that the history of invention follows this pattern of 40 different solutions. Therefore, it gives you a great head start. I use AI all the time to do stuff to give me a spark. It's not usually the final answer, although it's getting closer sometimes. Give me an idea about how to do this thing, and then you go, oh, now I can save me a bunch of time because now jumpstart it, right?
Yeah. And give us thank you for that. And one takeaway on marketing.
I'm probably the only chemical engineer in the world that's teaching word of mouth marketing. Okay. I can boil the whole class down to this. What's the one thing that goes far beyond expectations? And don't tell me customer service, I'm going to slap you, any of that stuff. It's got to be something that makes you laugh, cry, or get angry when you first come up with the idea because it's so ridiculous. I'll give you a quick example. How about a jewelry store? Jewelry store says, hey, if anything ever happens to your jewelry, anything, dog eats it, gets lost, stolen, we replace it for free. What's your response to that?
I'm gonna go buy something from them.
Most people go, that's BS. And where's the loophole? What's the loophole? There isn't one. What do you mean there's no loophole? I have to have it, the times, you got to be readjusted in your shop every 3 months. No. So 10 years later, I lose it. No. So most people have never, ever on their financial report or their budget said a budget line for word of mouth marketing, how to go buy it.
Yeah.
How do you buy word of mouth? So these guys budgeted $50,000 for the first year to pay for that promise, right? Of they're going to get ripped off and stolen and taken. They ended up spending five. So they went from 350,000 a year in sales to 20 million in 6 years.
Wow.
Because of one thing, one promise, not three. Just come up with something that's completely ridiculous. And one where people would have to go, I won't go down that rabbit hole. They ask some more questions because I have about 400 examples around that of how to make one thing that just like, okay. And then your reaction is going to be, this is super stupid and you can't do it. And I'm going to go broke and go out of business. And then you figure out a way to design it so you don't.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. All right. That's great. Those are great tips. Thank you so much. All right. Quick speed round, Mark. Book that's had a big impact on you.
Books, all of Roy Williams. So it's called The Trilogy, and they're just books written from a super different angle about marketing that are not anything you see because they're like one-page stories.
What's it called? The Trilogy?
The Trilogy by Roy Williams. Yeah, he's got 3 different books out there. He was a New York Times bestseller. All 3 of those in the late 90s.
All right, good. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
I had a general I worked for one time, and I screwed up something really bad, and he called me in his office. I go, yeah, this is a big one. I'm getting fired. And he goes, he could see on my face I was freaking out. He's like, dude, I'm not going to fire you for making a mistake. He goes, if you're right 100% of the time, Mark, it means you spent way too much time on that task.
Yeah.
You didn't move on. I said, okay. So I felt really good, and I walked away. Said, thanks. I turn around, go out of his office. He goes, however, I go, yes. He pulls a quarter out of his pocket. He goes, if you're only right half the time, the hell with you. I don't need you. I'll just flip a coin, make the decision myself. So somewhere between 50 and less than 100.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right. And finish this sentence. One thing everybody can do to raise their frequency today is
put your damn phone down.
Yeah.
All right. Go think about something. Go look at some trees.
Yeah. Get into nature.
Mark,
this was great. Tell everybody who your ideal clients are and where they can connect with you.
It's Resona, RES. Oh, well, actually, we're going to give them this website. You ready? We didn't talk about this, but thefdasucks.com. Okay. That's the website I want them to go to. It'll take them to the page and give them a bunch more information. That's it. I mean, that's just the FDA. We didn't get into it, but they do not want this technology to exist because it works. That's a whole nother episode. But thefdasucks.com, and then go learn a bunch more info. And they get a discount and everything. It's like $150 off. So
all right, good. All right, Think Community. Well, Mark, thanks so much. Think Community. We talk a lot about raising your vibration, raising your frequency, and how to kind of step into your highest potential. Mark, I appreciate you talking about frequency and the benefits and paying more attention to that. Those are good things to think about. If Mark can help you, please reach out. If I can help you, please reach out. JonDwoskin.com. Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.